والسلام على رسول الله وعلى نبينا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين. اللهم فقهنا في الدين وعلمنا التأويل يا رب العالمين. اللهم إنا نسألك علما نافعا ورزقا طيبا وعملا متقبلا. الحمد لله، ما زلنا في كتاب الحج في عمدة الفقه. We are still on the book of Hajj and Umrah in the book Umdatu al-Fiqh, and we are on the chapter of Expiation, Bab al-Fidya. So last class we talked about the Mahdurat al-Ihram, the things that break your Ihram or break your Hajj and Umrah, invalidate it. And now today we'll talk about what are the penalties or what are the expiation, what are the things that you may have to do, either fasting or slaughtering an animal or feeding people for different circumstances, inshallah. قال المصنف رحمه الله, the author says, may Allah have mercy upon him, وهي على ضربين, and it is of two types. So expiation is of two types. أحدهما على التخيير وهي فدية الأذى واللبس والطيب، فله الخيار بين صيام 3 أيام أو إطعام 3 آصع من تمر ل6 مساكين أو ذبح شاة. The first type is على التخيير, where a person is given choice, and this expiation is for fidyatul adha, and fidyatul adha is for shaving the hair, doing due to necessity, or so if you do it out of necessity or otherwise as well, out of non-necessity, wearing clothing that are sewn, wearing perfume. So if he does any of these things, the person has the choice of fasting for 3 days, feeding 3 sa'as of dates to 6 individuals, so feeding 6 masakin, 6 individuals, giving them food, or slaughtering a sheep or a goat. So you have choice of either it'am, feeding people, slaughtering, or you can fast for 3 days if you do this. وَجَزَاءُ الصَّيْدِ مِثْلُ مَا قَتَلَ مِنَ النَّعَمِ إِلَّا الطَّائِرَ فَإِنَّ فِيهِ قِيمَتُهُ إِلَّا الْحَمَامَةِ فَفِيهَا شَاء وَالنَّعَامَةِ فَفِيهَا بَدَنَةٌ ويخير بين إخراج المثل أو تقويمه بطعام فيطعم لكل مسكين مدا أو يصوم عن كل مد يوما. Now we come to the second category of expiation, and that is hunting or killing game. So he says the expiation for killing game animals or hunting wild animals is a domestic animal that is equal to the wild one killed. So basically, جزاء الصيد مثل ما قتل من النعم. So you give basically what you have to do is you have to slaughter an animal like the one that you did, equivalent to the one that you did. So domesticated animal is equal to the wild one killed, except for birds, as their value would be due. فَإِنَّ فِيهِ قِيمَةٌ. So if it's a bird, then what you do is you look at what the value is for that bird, right? And then that is the expiation is due upon you. You have to give that in sadaqah, that value of that bird. Other than that, what you do is you look at the animal, and you have to slaughter one like it that is domesticated, that is like, for example, farmed, right? As their value would be due instead, except for a pigeon for which a sheep is due. So if you slaughter a pigeon or if you hunt a pigeon, then what you need to do is you have to slaughter a sheep. And an ostrich for a camel is due. So if you slaughter an ostrich or a pigeon, then these two, you don't do taqweem, or you don't get the value of that and you give it in sadaqah. Rather, you slaughter whatever is due based on the text from the Quran and the Sunnah. So for a pigeon, you would slaughter a sheep, and for an ostrich, you would slaughter a camel. And that would be due upon you if you're in the state of Ihram and you hunted these 2 animals. he is given a choice of sacrificing an equal domesticated animal or giving its food in value, feeding a mud to every poor individual, or fasting a day in place of every mud he had to give away. So what do you do with this meat once you get it? If you, for example, you have to slaughter an animal like it, or you have to slaughter a sheep or a camel for hunting, what do you do? So what you do is you give it to the masakin, and you give every miskin, every poor person, a mud. And a mud, as we said, was 1/4 ruba a sa', right? 1/4 of a sa'. And you can estimate a mud by an average person's handful. Right? In another hadith, it mentions a mud is equivalent to an individual's handful. So you would give this to every poor person. Now, you're also able, the unique thing about this chapter is that you're able to, if you don't want to give the food, or if you don't want to slaughter an animal based on what you've hunted on, you can convert that into fasting. So you can convert that into fasting, and the author mentions it here. For fasting a day in place of every mud he had to give away. So you figure out how many amdad you had to give away, and then for each mud you had to give away, if you don't want to slaughter, then you can fast for every single day, and that will be your expiation. So you can either give the value in food by feeding every mud to a poor person, or you can fast in its place. Then he says, al-darbu al-thani ala tartib. Then he talks about the second type of expiation, and this is where options, there are options, but you have to do it in tartib. You have to do it in sequence. So if you're not able to do the first one, then you can move to the second and then the third. If you're able to do the first one, you have to prioritize doing the first one, which is mentioned. So he says, وَهُوَ الْمُتَمَتِّعِ يَلْزَمُهُ شَاةٌ فَإِن لَمْ يَجِدْ فَصِيَامُ ثَلَاثَةِ أَيَّامٍ في حج وسبعة إذا رجعتم. And this is for the mutamatti', the one who is performing Umrah and Hajj. He must sacrifice a sheep or a goat. So when you perform a Hajj, tamattu', you have to sacrifice a sheep or a goat. What if a person cannot afford it, or he does not have a sheep or a goat? He's not able to find one. What does he do? In this case, he must fast 3 days during Hajj. So 3 days during Hajj and 7 days when he returns to his homeland. وَفِدْيَةُ الْجِمَاعِ بَدَنَةٌ فَإِن لَمْ يَجِدْ فَصِيَامُ كَصِيَامِ الْمُتَمَتِّعِ. And the expiation for the one who had intercourse is that he must sacrifice a camel. And if he cannot afford it, then he must sacrifice, then he must fast like the one making tamattu', meaning 3 days in Hajj and 7 when you go back. And also he has to وَكَذَلِكَ الْحُكْمُ فِي دَمِّ فَوَاتٍ. And the ruling for the same for the sacrifice due for missing Hajj. So the person that commits intercourse during his Hajj, as we mentioned before, he has to do the sacrifice, and he also has to repeat the Hajj next year as well, if he done it before the tahallul al-awwal, before coming out of the first major ihram. Then he says, قال والمحصر يلزمه دم فإن لم يجده فصيام عشرة أيام. And the person who is prevented from proceeding must sacrifice an animal. If he cannot afford it, then he must fast for 10 days. So, for example, if you have the intention for Hajj, you go to the miqat, you put your ihram on, for some reason you're not able to make Hajj, you're prevented from making Hajj. What do you do in this case? Then in this case, you must sacrifice your animal, number one. Number two, you must fast for 10 days. That is your expiation. You must fast for 10 days. And he concludes by saying, وَمَنْ كَرَّرَ مَحْذُورًا مِنْ جِنْسِ غَيْرِ قَتْلِ الصَّيْدِ فَكَفَّارَةٌ وَاحِدَةٌ فَإِنْ كَفَّرَ عَنِ الْأَوَّلِ قَبْلَ فِعْلِ الثَّانِي سَقَطَ حُكْمُ مَا كَفَّرَ عَنْهُ وَإِنْ فَعْلَ مَحْذُورًا مِنْ أَجْنَاسٍ فَلِكُلِّ وَاحِدٍ كَفَّارَةٌ. Then he says that if a person does a forbidden act more than once, so he repeats one act more than once. For example, he wears a shirt, right? And then, okay, he leaves it off. Then he wears it again another day, the second day of Hajj, right? So if a person does a forbidden act more than once, aside from killing game animals, then the expiation is due once. So if he does that same act more than once, so it's of the same nature, right? For example, wearing clothing. So he wears a shirt, and then he takes it off, so he knows he has to do one. He has to do one fidya for that, right? Fidya til adha. Then he wears maybe pants the next day. It's from the same type of expiation, right? So that is two. But if he had not done the fidya yet, then he only has to do one fidya. So he only has to do it once. But if he already compensated the first forbidden act before the second, the ruling pertains to the first becomes void. The first one has been concluded, so he must expiate for the second one. So if after the first day he wears a shirt, and then he realizes he made a mistake, and then what he does is he does a fidya. He feeds 6 people, for example. And then the second day he wears pants. Then he must, since he already paid for that fidya, he already completed that expiation, he needs to do another one for the pants the second day. However, if he had done the first one and then the second one, and he had not paid for both of them yet, then one would be enough. So one fidya would be enough. And if he committed 2 or more forbidden acts of different types, then the expiation is due for each one. So if he committed 2 different types of actions, then the expiation would be due for each one. So for example, if he wore a shirt and then he shaved his hair, right? Those are 2 different types of expiation. So he would have to do 2 different fidyas for that. And we will end off here, inshallah. Wa sallallahu ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in.
If you, for example, do like that and some hair braid or brush the hair or like that.
So if you do, if you shower, for example, or if you comb your beard and some hair falls out naturally, unintentionally, then that does not count. What is meant here is intentionally pulling out your hair, or intentionally shaving, or intentionally doing what you did. So even if you put on a jacket, for example, and it was like really cold, but or you put on a shirt by mistake, maybe you went to shower and then you put something on by mistake, right? Like a coat, or you put you put on some perfume by mistake, then that does not count, inshallah. What you do is you take off the clothing, or you wash off the perfume as soon as possible, and inshallah there is no fidya upon you.
But if it is very cold, even then you cannot wear anything.
If it's very cold, then you can put multiple ihrams on. Or if it comes really, really cold, right? And it's like life or death, or it's really cold, you're going to be sick. Then you could wear a coat, but then you pay the fidya. And inshallah, there is no sin upon you